Welcome to the Planet MicroCap Showcase Toronto in partnership with MicroCapClub. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and joining me right now is Tanya Rowntree. She is the Senior Director, Head of Listings for Cboe Canada. Tanya, thank you for joining me today. How you doing?
Good, thanks. Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. Thank you again on behalf of all of us here at Planet Microcap and for you representing Cboe to have Cboe as a sponsor of the event. I'm really excited to do this virtual Q&A because we've been getting to know each other now for a while and really getting to know what the Cboe Canada strategy is as well. And
Yeah.
so it's been really cool and interesting to as things have been developing. But first and foremost, kind of setting the stage for this virtual keynote here, from your vantage point at Cboe Canada, how would you describe the overall health of Canadian markets right now, both in terms of trading activity and investor sentiment?
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to continue to build this relationship and are really thankful to be able to have this platform. So thanks for having us on. Yeah, where we sit at Cboe Canada today, I'd say the overall health of the Canadian markets is stable. I really do believe that, but I would describe it definitely as cautiously optimistic. Trading volumes have held up really well, and we're seeing lots of investor engagement, but in certain sectors. So it's particularly in AI, technology-enabled industries, energy transition. That's the area. But that said, like sentiment among investors is pretty selective, right? So capital's flowing, but where it's flowing is pretty strategic. So investors are focusing on companies that have really strong balance sheets, that have credible management teams, clear pathways to profitability. So what's encouraging is that even despite the kind of crazy global uncertainty that we've been seeing, there's consistent liquidity. There's really healthy competition among market participants. And I think that that's been kind of underscoring how healthy our capital markets ecosystem really has been in Canada.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you kind of hit on my next question here a little bit, but
Sure.
uh, who is really driving the trading activity, for instance, as between retail, institutional, or algorithmic partnerships compared to a year ago?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been some evolution. Institutional and algorithmic trading continues to dominate like overall volumes. Absolutely. But retail remains a really meaningful and dynamic and growing part of our Canadian market, particularly in the small cap and ETF space and investment product space. So there's lots of engagement through online platforms, which have become so much more sophisticated. And I think that that's leading to greater efficiency and transparency in the overall market. And when we look at average daily volumes, we're seeing some market differences in terms of order size. And that really, I think, speaks to smaller order sizes among do-it-yourself and retail investors. And so we are seeing a bit of a transition, but there's no doubt institutional and algorithmic is still the strongest part of the trading activity.
Absolutely. All right. So, not to Cboe Canada specifically, what's been the
Yeah.
current environment like for new listings on Cboe Canada? Are you seeing renewed momentum in IPOs or companies coming to market through alternative structures?
Yeah, we've seen a lot coming to market through alternative structures. There's definitely been an uptick in momentum in financings and transactions. And that's kind of what I would say is a bit of a leading indicator. So there's a really healthy pipeline discussion happening. And so I think that that's really positive. But like most global markets, traditional IPO activity has been a lot more measured than we've seen. And that it's not a Canada story. That's a global story. So what we're seeing is companies are taking like a much more calculated approach to going public. They're really choosing their timing carefully, and they're seeking exchange partners that have stability, strong market presence, and really robust connectivity. And I think those are all areas where Cboe Canada excels and will continue to excel. It's just the timing, I think, has to be right. And it's good to see some of this transactional activity happening and some positive financings closing. And I think that it's just a matter of time before we see in the pipeline starts to begin to convert into deals that are coming to market.
I like that word measured. That was good. I saw how you did that. Not bad. So, so Tanya, which sectors or themes are showing the most interest from both issuers and investors right now? And I'd even amend this to say,
Mhm.
which sectors have been showing the most interest that you've seen in your pipeline for
Yeah.
Cboe Canada listings?
Like interestingly, I'd say they're probably both the same. And
So I adjusted a little bit because I
as it
figured it was
goes,
probably gonna.
right?
You're like, yeah,
Yeah,
tech, yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, innovation. But it is true, right? It sounds trite, but it really is true. Sectors that are aligned with innovation and transformation. So very topical themes like AI, data infrastructure for sure is a big one. Clean tech, next generation mining and materials. So supporting that energy transition. Canada's really strong and dominant in that area. But even on the services side. So I think there's, a renewed sort of investor focus on those themes, but also on profitability and cash flow. And so companies are really and a little harder to find, obviously, in some of the innovative spaces among AI. But on the issuer side, we're also seeing, entrepreneurs taking a much more strategic kind of timing and approach, and what they're really wanting in all of those sectors, I think, is to have access to capital, but they really want visibility and they want to be focused about their investor base. And so I think, there's been a lot of talk about communities in the private space and certainly in communities like Planet MicroCap, right? Where there really is a much more engaged investor base. And so I think we'll continue to see that. We'll continue to see entrepreneurs at all phases of the capital raising cycle engage much more closely with their audiences. And of course, those themes naturally attract a specific type of community. And so I think that's one trend that we're seeing.
Interesting. So, Tanya, quick follow-up also
Mhm.
there, because we've talked a lot about how Cboe Canada is positioning itself amongst its listings business,
Yep.
from anywhere to being not necessarily venture market, but now wanting to go more upscale, larger companies.
Yeah.
What's Cboe Canada's where are you guys at? What's the marketing push? Where are you guys really focusing on right now?
Yeah, so we're a tier one exchange, as we've talked about. And so currently we don't really have a venture offering as one would think of some of our peer group, which really focus on that junior space. So we're a tier one exchange and we're really focused on companies that are globally minded. What we're building is a really robust, unique platform to be able to access capital globally. And in order to do that, you really do need to have companies that you're working with that have size and scale and are meant for a platform like ours, right? With that ability to intralist, to take advantage of raising capital in foreign jurisdictions like, not just Canada here at home, but also the US, Australia, Europe, the UK. If we're going to be identifying companies that can make the best use of that connectivity and that reach and breadth that we have, we really want to go after companies that can scale and survive, right, in that kind of a market. And that's just simply going to be companies that are a little higher up in the market cap and with a little bit more of a globally minded view on how they want to grow.
100%. I mean, obviously, probably the main folks you probably talk with the most about, the pipeline for companies. It's probably the banks, investment
Yep.
banks, the ones doing deals. So, I mean, what's been their feedback? I mean, listen, you're not a startup exchange. Obviously, Cboe has been around forever.
Yeah.
You have listings on Cboe Canada. It's not like there's no listings or anything like that. So, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
make it seem like you guys are just getting started, But like, what's been some of the feedback from some of the banks? Saying like, all right, yeah, no, we hear you, all that kind of stuff. Like, what's been
Oh,
what's been going on?
yeah, I think some of the feedback that we're getting is, really an enthusiasm and a positivity towards what we're building because that doesn't exist. It's unique. And I think where the bankers are recognizing, I was just talking to a banker yesterday at lunch about how his business is now like 55% outside of Canada. It's just the way that the world is these days, despite some of the rhetoric that we're seeing. Capital markets are, it doesn't, they're not. I heard a great quote, and I wish, of course, I can't remember it now, but it's that money sort of doesn't care where you live, right? And so the reality is we have a global footprint with capital markets, so I think that that's really resonating with some of the partners that we've been talking to and some of the bankers that we've been working with, and there's a lot of positivity about that. But they also like our flexible nature and how we work, and we're business oriented, and how we partner and align with clients, and really have that customer service approach, but also how we care about liquidity, we care about transparency, we care about market structure. As you said, we're not an upstart exchange, right? Like we're in the corporate listings business, as we're here to talk about today. But we operate 5 stock exchanges around the world with hundreds, over 2,000 ETFs, right? And in Canada alone, we've got now, and we were the innovators in this, 130 Canadian depository receipts. A really cool investable vehicle for investors who want to trade fractional shares, trade big US names in local currency, in a tradable vehicle that is a bit novel. And I think a lot of people thought, why would you do that? Well, now we've got billions trading in, these 130 names and many more to come. So we've always been on that innovative side. And I think our partners, whether they're bankers or lawyers, or even investors, have really appreciated where we're moving the ball forward. And I think we have to be forward thinking in this kind of an economy. We're getting a lot of messages out of the rest of the world about digitization, tokenization. You really can't be stuck in your ways. And so part of that is how do you globally connect that capital? And so it's something we've been building. We're getting really, really close, and I'm proud to say, ready to launch in Australia, which was just announced, and soon to be in Europe and the UK. And so I think a lot of that enthusiasm that we've seen, I look forward to telling the stories in 26 and 27 of companies who've really taken advantage of that. So yeah, I
Quick,
think that's been resonating.
yeah, quick follow up on that. So what does that mean that you're almost ready to launch and you just launched in Australia? Give me some more context there because this is news to me.
Yeah, so we just received approval from the regulator in Australia to be a competitor stock exchange along with ASX for corporate listings. And so what really makes Cboe unique is we've got all of those connection points. We've got all of that data, all of that trading support, all of those banking relationships that already exist there because of the hundreds of ETFs and because of the exchange traded products that we've got in our multiple jurisdictions. The last piece of the puzzle is to really then open that up for corporate listings. And so for companies who really want to raise capital, if you're a mining company sitting in Canada and you've got an asset or a property that sits in Australia, and you've got investors there that are going to be really interested in your story, what you're going to be able to do is to intralist your company on Cboe and have one platform and be able to list in Canada and in Australia and access investors that way. And then eventually, we're also building this capability of being posted for trading. So the ability to have that security trade in Australia in local currency for investors who really understand the story. And of course, I don't need to tell your audience about the synergies that exist between Canada and Australia from a mining perspective, and certainly Canada and Europe. And so we have lots of companies who are really interested, and some of them are like consumer products companies, but they have distribution and they have manufacturing in Europe, and they've got people who really love what they're doing, and that ability is appealing for them to be able to say, as we grow, we want to be able to choose an exchange partner that can grow with us. And we won't need to go, to 2 different exchanges. There's actually a lot of synergies and a lot of streamlining that can happen with one exchange partner.
Absolutely. So, this gets into another topic of having to do with global context. And, you know, I think some folks are trying to get, obviously there's dual listings been around forever, right? List
Hmm.
on one of your competitors exchange and then cross, dual list on OTC or something in the US or NASDAQ and all that good stuff. But
Hmm.
SIPO is really on the forefront of this idea of the intra listing. So can you compare and contrast what the real main difference is and what the value proposition is for those that aren't familiar with this type of model?
Yeah, I think we really do operate, as one company. And we have this very interconnected way of operating. And I think that when you're able to solve for challenges in one organization, there's a lot of appeal and a lot of benefit for that. Certainly, a lot can be accomplished by having a dual listing, but there can be cost efficiencies that can come from an intra-listing with one partner like Cboe. And then there can also be a real improvement on the customer service, time to market, speed to market by working with a partner that wants to talk to one another. Not that we don't always, play nicely in the sandbox, but it's two very different companies, two very different sets of a rule book. What we're trying to do is harmonize our listing standards, harmonize that process of what the path to listing looks like in multiple jurisdictions. So from that perspective, an issuer benefits. There's still, of course, the regulatory differences and the stuff that we'll have to work through, but I'd say that's the predominant advantage.
Absolutely. All right, so we're coming up on the end, but I had a couple more questions that
Yeah,
are Cboe specific. So
sure.
I mean, you kind of alluded to this a lot already, but I think the main thing that people want to hear is yes, we get it, tier one exchange. Yeah, not necessarily venture, but
Margin eligible, institutional coverage.
but
Yeah, so I think those things are important.
no, 100%. So I mean, how is Cboe Canada uniquely positioned to help this next generation of Canadian growth companies succeed in the public markets?
I think there are a number of ways where we're uniquely situated to help growth companies. And I mean, that's how we've started, right? So like the whole genesis of how we began was really to support growth companies in their journey. And I think part of that you can't step away from how we structure our trading, right? So I think that from a liquidity perspective, that's been really helpful for growth companies. We have smart order routing, right? Advanced matching technology that ensures fair access and optimal execution. Those are like that fairness factor of the way that we started, I think is a really important thing. Consolidated data, I think is a really important thing. And then I guess I'd say finally is just that global connection for growth companies and the enhancements that we've built from a technology perspective. I think it sets us way apart. We just went through a huge technological transformation at the exchange across all of our businesses, and so we all speak to one another now. And when you go through acquisitions, there's that period of time where you've got to catch up. And we're there now and we're full steam ahead. And so I think for a growth company that's really wanting a company to stand behind them from a technology perspective, from a servicing perspective with the right partnerships, access to the right visibility, I think we stand apart in that respect.
Very good. All right, final question for you here today. As we as we listen, I know you can answer more, but I want to, we
Like this
gotta
is easy, Bobby.
we gotta, I want to button it up,
Yep.
chef's
Sounds
kiss
good.
at the end of it. But
Oh, okay. Pressure.
so no, well, no, it's not. This isn't a curveball by any means. But I mean,
Okay.
looking ahead as we head into 2026, what's top of mind for Cboe
Yeah.
Canada, and where do you see the biggest opportunities to strengthen the ecosystem for both investors and issuers?
Yeah, it's a good question. Speaking for the organization, I think top of mind for us is definitely growth with purpose. We're really focused on attracting more innovative and globally minded companies to list in Canada. And so I think, we do see a lot of interest from US companies that aren't quite ready for the US market that want to come to Canada and know then that they have a partner that can get them back there. And many of our issuers do that. And, one day they'll do that on Cboe US, not just going to NASDAQ. And so, I think attracting globally minded companies is top of mind for us. Deepening investor access and education, especially in the ETF and small cap segments, is something we're really passionate about. We do that a lot in the US market in terms of options education. And I definitely think you'll see more of that from Cboe this year in our ETF segment for sure. And small caps, of course, I think benefit from that as most of it is around trading and execution. And then building partnerships, right, on enhancing data, liquidity, and visibility. I think that's going to be an area. There are lots of platforms that we've partnered with this year to really help really get that message out of our issuers and sectors too, a lot of sector education. So I think we see a real opportunity to modernize how companies and investors connect. And that's for me what I'm most passionate about, connecting great companies with pools of capital where they might not have otherwise had that opportunity to link up or connect. And so we'll be leveraging our Cboe Global Technology for that and taking our distinctly Canadian approach. And I really like that with integrity and with community and with a real support for the ecosystem.
Like I said, we wanted to button up. That was a great place to end it. So, Tanya, with that, where can our audience go and find more information on Cboe Canada?
Yeah, visit us on our website at cboe.com or, over the coming days at the Planet MicroCap conference in Toronto. The whole team will be there. We're proud to be a sponsor and to be present and engaging with everyone there. And I hope to meet you when you're there.
Very good. Well, Tanya, thank you so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it. Good luck. Stay safe. I'll see you in
Thank you.
Toronto.
We'll see you in Toronto.
Thank you.
Bye.